What's going on, YouTube? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Meko, joined by my guy Morgan here. And Morgan, the Lions have probably their most important game lined up this week, and it may be the most important game because it's the next game, but it's also an important game because the Lions do have the 2 seed on the line going up against the Dallas Cowboys. First and foremost, how do you kind of see this game shaking out between these two teams?
It's going to be cool, Miko. I think the atmosphere is going to be crazy. It's two 11-win teams really late in the season with, like you said, seeding implications on the line. So both teams have a lot to play for. And I expect kind of like a slugfest because both of these teams have looked pretty good as of late. Like they both had their hiccups, but at the same time, they are where they are in the standings for a reason. So, yeah, I'm excited to get into two of the biggest problems the Lions are going to have to deal with come Saturday for sure.
Yeah, like you were saying, both of these teams are fairly stacked. They have a number of players on both on the offense and defensive side of the football that both teams are going to have to consider. But when it comes to the Lions, Morgan, there's two guys that like rise above the rest, in my opinion. And we're going to take, like you said, we're going to take a look at both of them. Starting out here with the guy on defense, the number one guy on their defensive unit that really kind of makes everything go for them, Micah Parsons. And when looking at Micah, he's like where's Waldo, essentially, because wherever the Cowboys decide to line him up at, this entire offense has to be mindful of that and be able to adjust accordingly, because he's not your prototypical edge in that he's just going to line up on one side of your line and just rush from there.
No, you're right, Miko. They move him around a good bit. Here they have him lined up almost between the guard and tackle, like almost at like a 3 technique, and he makes mincemeat of this guard. It's a tough matchup. He's got really active hands. He gets off the ball insanely quick, and the guard just gets caught leaning, and he almost olays him, right? Like just a little olay move, and he's on top of Hurts in an instant.
Yeah, and again, this is a completion by Hurts, but again, it's a rushed throw, right? Like everything has to be, like your offense has to be kind of mindful of that when Micah Parsons is on the field. Is that like, listen, you're not going to have a lot of time to go through your progression, because Micah Parsons is going to be gunning for you from the minute that football is snapped.
Yeah, and this is shortening his route to get to the quarterback, right? Like it sounds simple, but that's the reasoning behind the Chiefs moving Chris Jones inside when they do it, when the Lions move Hutch inside, and so on and so forth. You're just shortening the overall path, the length of ground that needs to be covered for your pass rusher to get to the quarterback. So right there, yeah, he's on him. They convert it and they move the chains to AJ Brown. But like you said, it takes rhythm. It has to be fast, and it has to be on time because, and again, the Lions' offensive line, the Eagles' offensive line's are no slouch, but the Lions' offensive line is going to have to be more disciplined with their hands than this if they're going to want to keep Parsons at bay.
Yeah, and I think that's a reoccurring theme when we start going through some of these plays with Micah Parsons, is that if your technique isn't sound, Mike is going to make you pay for it. He's not the biggest guy, right? He's your stereotypical like edge rusher size, 6'3", around 250, powerful, like has powerful hands, great athleticism. But not like the type of like imposing physical traits that you may see in a Myles Garrett or even a TJ Watt or a Nick Bosa in those senses. But he finds these really good ways of winning. And most of the time it's him taking advantage of like the opposing offensive lineman just not having sound technique.
Yeah, and he wins in a unique way, almost like a Von Miller-esque during his heyday, because he's, like you said, not super tall, but he wins with leverage. He wins by converting speed to power. He's going to, tackles and offensive linemen in general are always going to be wary of him winning that outside shoulder with speed. So, once they get caught, anticipating that, then that's when he can strike and get them with a little bit of speed to power. So, yeah, he's a problem, and he's one of the reasons the Cowboys have such a good defense against the pass. In particular, they're ranked 5th in pass defense DVOA. And yeah, this next clip is tough because they put him in a stunt where they're running a little game with him and DeMarcus Lawrence, and they execute it to perfection, right?
Yeah, and those are two guys. We're talking about two guys on this Dallas defense that's already a problem to contend with. Marcus Lawrence is again no slouch. He's been doing it a long time down there in Dallas, getting after the quarterback. But then you pair him up with a Micah Parsons, and you have these guys pulling off stunts where, typically when we see the Lions do a stunt, it's, defensive tackle, edge, and maybe, Hutch is attacking the guard instead of attacking the tackle. In this situation, Micah goes all the way from, the right tackle spot all the way over in between the center and guard. But again, does it very quickly because of the athleticism that he has.
Yeah, and he does a good job of running, a tight hoop just around Lawrence as Lawrence occupies, that guard's attention for just a second. And yeah, this is just a good job by both of them executing this. You can tell that they've played together for a little while now. And yeah, like you said, Lawrence is good in his own right, but yeah, look at just how Parsons just bends that corner right there, and just it's tight, man. There's not a lot of wasted movement, and he gets there quickly.
Yeah, and it goes back to what Ben Johnson talked about in his press conference when he was meeting with the media this week, in just regards to, again, Mike is going to line up everywhere, and everyone on that offensive line has to be mindful of it. So just because he's lined up opposite, Panay, doesn't mean he's going to attack Panay. That means Frank still has to be mindful of where he is. Jonah, as far on the other side of the line he has to be mindful of where Micah Parsons is, because if something happens and he needs to slide over protection to be able to pick him up on a stunt like this, that can be the difference between Jared Goff making a completion like Tua did here, or potentially getting a fumble or throwing an interception or something like that.
Yeah, great points, Meko. And to that point too, you'll see the left guard here. He picks up, he does a good job of keeping his eyes up and looking for work, but he misses Parsons looping around and ends up getting a little chip in on the edge on 54 when it's really not as pertinent. So yeah, to your point, that's where it's going to be. Communication is going to be key, and all five linemen are going to have to keep their head on a swivel, because he can change which gap he's rushing in an instant. Right as the snap is happens. So that's always got to be in the back of their mind, or else you're going to get Goff in one too many situations where he's getting tattooed, and we don't want that.
Yeah. And so the next thing that I kind of want to highlight for our audience, Morgan, is, again, something that I said a little while ago, in that Micah Parsons makes you pay when you have poor technique. And I think that was like a prime example of anybody that watched the Cowboys Miami game. When Micah Parsons was lined up opposite of Kendall Lamb, it just felt like a masterclass in how not to set in terms of pass, in terms of pass protection. Because every time he had a sloppy pass set, Micah Parsons was taking advantage of him. And that's exactly what we get here.
Yeah, and this is tough to deal with for some tackles, just because, there's even a bigger emphasis on hand placement and like getting that initial punch in. And here you can just see Lamb never really gets a good grip on Parsons, or a good fit, if you will. And he's just beating him quickly, and he ends up scurrying through the guard tackle gap and affects the throw. And yeah, this is one of the ways he affects the game, because the Dolphins, to their credit, have enough resources devoted to blocking him here, but the guard's just not quick enough. And Lamb, like you said, is on skates immediately, and it's just a bad rep.
Yeah, I want to get back to this angle at the top when we can get back to it, though. But if you look at Lamb's feet, a typical pass set is kind of like a kick. He kind of starts backpedaling in this regard, and like, again, that's just something that you don't want to do. You don't want to be an offensive lineman on your heels with a pass rusher coming at you.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Meko. Like, it's almost like a very much of a vertical set. So you'll hear tackles talk about, like, they're going to be utilizing a vertical set or his horizontal set, and that's just where that initial kick gets them. And yeah, he's like hitting the back pedal before Parsons is even making contact with him, to your point. So yeah, that's just a recipe for disaster, and it doesn't give you a chance to get your anchor down and to slow him down the way you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's something that, Morgan, when I saw this happening with Miami, I immediately remembered, like, okay, the Lions did play Micah Parsons last year. Like, they did get a chance to see him. Penei Sewell got a chance to see him. What did it look like? And I can at least have a little bit of confidence in knowing that, when watching a lot of their matchups against each other, Penei didn't have those issues. Penei was very sound in a lot of his pass reps, and it made it easier for him to control Penei. So it's like, or for him to control Micah in those situations. So it is something that it kind of puts my heart at ease to know that Penei is at least usually very sound in his technique, so that something like this shouldn't be a concern, right?
Yeah, and Penei also possesses a freakish ability to anchor on the fly, whether he's like having to reset because of a counter move, He's awesome at just being able to move, slide, and re-anchor like on the fly. It's just an uncanny ability. You know, all of them, like the elite tackles, have it. The Lane Johnsons, the Paneys, the Trent Williams of the world. So yeah, to your point, I definitely agree with that. On the flip side, though, as good as Taylor Decker's been through, you know, this year and years past, I will say some of these speed rushers like the Von Millers and the Micah Parsons of the world, in my memory, my recent memory, those are some of the ones that give him some issues. So
Yeah.
I would say look for, tight ends and chips to be utilized there just to even widen his path, or just to have a tight end stay in general to be able to help block him
Yeah.
rather.
No, absolutely. They're definitely going to need to have a number of running backs, tight ends, just kind of helping out in the mix when it comes to keeping Parsons at bay when he's rushing off the edge. But like we said, again, Morgan, Micah rushes from everywhere, right? It's a constant theme that we kind of have for this video in regards to talking about him. And so we've seen him attack guards in stunts. We've seen him attack the tackle off the edge. Let's not leave out the center, because sometimes they'll just put him at middle linebacker and have him rush up the gut. And again, put your center in a really tough situation where he's not used to dealing with these types of pass rushers in certain situations.
Yeah, and that's the thought process a lot of the time when coaches move their edge rushers on the inside on passing downs, just because guards and centers typically aren't used to dealing with this kind of monster, to your point. So, yeah, this is a good way for them to, again, you're making the path for Parsons to get to the quarterback very direct. And again, he wins with his hands super quickly here, is barely thrown off of course in terms of running a straight line at Tua, and it forces yet another incompletion. So he really does, like, I know he has 13 sacks on the year, right?
13 and a
Um,
half.
13 and a half, excuse me. So
I'm
like,
sorry. No,
yeah,
my bad. 13. My bad.
okay. Either way, it's a lot. And,
Yeah.
for every sack that he has, he probably has several of these plays where he's affecting the throw and essentially rendering it a dud just by applying pressure so fast, because that's how you throw off an offense, is with pressure right up the middle and really fast pressure, where even an offense like Miami's that's predicated on timing and rhythm, they can't even get into it.
Yeah, and this is like you're saying, this is a Miami offense that has, weapons that are primarily built around speed. The Jalen Waddles, the Tyreek Hills, Raheem Mostert's, like they have speed guys. But when you have a pass rusher like Micah Parsons that can kind of be that equalizer on defense, it kind of doesn't matter. Again, especially if your offensive line isn't able to really get hands on him and disrupt his path.
Yeah, and it's going to be paramount for the Lions to be on top of that. Pre-snap, know where he's at. To your point at the beginning of the video, and just be aware of, where he is both pre and post-snap. Because I know that I say that a lot, but that's a big part of the game, both offensively and defensively, is knowing where the difference makers are. And yeah, this is his bread and butter too. You just line him up at the wide, out wide on the wide 9 almost here. Dallas is showing, and coming out of a 4-point stance, he just, poor Kendall Lamb again, just getting abused.
Yeah, it's again, we talk about like, hey, he'll mostly want to win with speed, but like you mentioned earlier, he does still have speed to power. And again, if you're not sound in your technique, if it's a little sloppy, if the help is a little late, Micah does have enough power to still drive you back into the lap of your quarterback.
Yep, for sure. And he plays with good leverage because he's not the tallest. He doesn't have the longest arms, if I'm not mistaken. But he does have elite get off. And yeah, if you're going to set the way Lamb was setting in this game, you're going to open yourself up to problems in the long term, just because there's going to be some reps like this where he catches you slipping and you're on skates and you're in the back of your quarterback's lap immediately.
And again, he gets some help too, right? Micah Parsons does, from the rest of this defensive line that are also like, they got some studs over there that are just as capable of pushing the pocket. So there's not as many opportunities for most opposing teams to double him, because listen, we still got to take care of DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side. We still got to take care of these defensive tackles in the middle that are really good at getting upfield and creating pressure. So again, whether it's Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker, like these guys are going to have to, for probably a good portion of the game, sometimes do it by themselves.
Yeah, and if you watch here too, on top of Parsons' impressive rush coming off the edge, you have Lawrence and the other defensive tackle running a game. So the defensive tackle goes first, occupies the eyes of the interior offensive line, Lawrence loops around and is right there at Tua as well. It was just like all four of them met at the quarterback pretty fast there. That was
Yeah,
an impressive rep.
yeah, that's what we call a party at the quarterback, right? And again, that's something that
Mm-hmm.
Detroit doesn't want to see because, listen, Jared Goff just isn't that type of guy to be able to escape pressure that well. He obviously doesn't have quite the arm strength to be able to throw through contact all that well either. So this is something, this is a guy, the guy, in my opinion, Morgan, that the Lions absolutely have to have a plan for and have to understand how they're going to handle him. I say all that to say, though, Morgan, after watching, I watched 3 different games of Micah Parsons today. I'm less concerned about him now than I was before I started watching film on him. And it's not because he's not as good as we've just been talking about, because he is. He's very good. The speed, the hand usage, the ability to finish, all of those things are very true about him. But he does still have a weakness. He does still struggle when he has to deal with physical offensive linemen. And if you go back and watch that Eagles game, he didn't rush against Lane Johnson much, if at all, in that game. They kept him primarily on the left-hand side. But Philly's left tackle isn't a slouch either, and he still was able to give Micah a lot of trouble. You go back to the Lions game of last year, and Panay gave him a lot of trouble, didn't give up a sack, didn't give up a pressure to Micah Parsons. There's a lot to feel confident about when looking at what the Lions can and should be able to do against a pass rusher of his ilk.
Yeah, that's a great point, Meko. And I do anticipate them keeping him away from Panay. And I would keep my best pass rusher away from Lane Johnson too. But then on the flip side, for teams like the Lions and the Eagles, you have Jordan Mailata in Philly and then Taylor Decker in Detroit. So you kind of have to pick your poison. But yeah, I would anticipate him not having a ton of reps with Panay just because they probably don't want to sink that asset because Panay's been dominant this year. There's really no other word for it.
Yeah, and I kind of understood it, the year before where it's like, oh, both guys are in year 2. Mike is a little bit more accomplished at that point than Panay had been at that point. And so maybe they thought like, oh, we have a better chance, with him going against the young guy than going against the veteran. But like you said, Taylor has had his struggles with some, speed rushers, but at the same time, Taylor had no problems with Micah last year either when he got his few opportunities against him. So it's going to be really interesting. Do they decide to maybe put Micah more so in the middle? Or again, are they just going to kind of have him roaming around and not just have him locked down to one spot? Whatever the case is, Morgan, I feel very confident though about this Lions offensive line being able to handle at least him. And then we'll have to figure out how they figure out the rest of this defensive line because like I said, they do have other weapons along that line that can be a problem.
Yep. And as we know, the best recipe to slow down a pass rush is just to bludgeon them on the ground. So I fully anticipate the Lions trying to shove some footballs up some noses because I think if you're going to pick a weakness for Dallas, that's definitely it, in my opinion, is their ability to stop the run. And, you get that going, then the Lions are going to be in business, in my opinion, on the road.
Absolutely. So that's the defensive side, right? And that's the number one piece that the Lions have to contend with. But Morgan, there's another guy on the offensive side that they have to be just as concerned about. And it's kind of a similar situation with Micah, where it's like you have to know where he is on the field at all times if you expect to be able to slow down this Dallas offense.
Yep, we're talking about the none other than CeeDee Lamb. I watched a couple games of CeeDee, some recent ones. The 3 clips we have are from their most recent loss to the Dolphins, but he still went off 10 catches for 118 and a score. They do a ton with him, man. He's had double-digit targets in each of the last 9 weeks, minus 2 games. And for those 2 games, he had 9 targets apiece. So they force-feed him the ball. They'll line him up in the backfield, in the slot, out wide. They motion him a ton. And like Parsons, they're hunting matchups. And yeah, this is just this first clip's just early on in the game, clean release, and the corner's out of phase from Jump Street. And it's tough because he might not be the fastest guy on the field, but the tools are still there where he can create separation really quickly and make throws easy for Dak, right?
Yeah, this is the type of stuff that you and I have talked about when it comes down to like, hey, we would love to see these type of routes for JMO, or even more specifically, these are the type of routes where we see Saint win a lot, for the Lions, where it's a crossing route. You're allowing your wide receiver to use their athletic traits and leverage to get open as they get across the field and make an easy throw for your quarterback. And CeeDee does that just as well as any other receiver in the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's an excellent route runner. He's been in the league a few years now, and he is understanding what defenses are trying to do to him to a greater extent. You can definitely tell when you watch him on tape. And he understands this offense. McCarthy's built a pretty good offense around CeeDee, that coaching staff, and yeah, he's definitely the focal point. You can tell. You watch like 2 series from Dallas, and you're like, okay, they really like getting the ball to 88. Got it.
Yeah. And again, that was something that we saw a lot last year as well. And the Lions didn't really have an answer for it when it came down to, again, CeeDee running those types of routes where, again, they have him in the slot. They are able to get the matchup that they want. And then, he's able to do the rest in terms of creating separation.
Yep. And it's a bit more concerning. We're filming this Thursday evening, and, Cam Sutton didn't practice today because of a toe injury, if I'm not mistaken. So that's another, thing to keep in the back of your mind as a already shorthanded Lions secondary for now, is dealing without their, might be without their best corner. We'll see. But yeah, this next clip, similar story to that first one, man. They need to, if you run a catch 22, right? Because you want to get hands on him and reroute him at the line of scrimmage. But then if he gets you on a clean release, you're even more out of phase. But in this instance, they're playing really soft.
It makes it just a really easy pitch and catch. And then CeeDee has enough juice to, again, make a guy miss and then just get to the end zone from where he's at.
Yeah, and you're right about the switch. It certainly looks like something got miscommunicated there. And yeah, Elliott's having a really good year too. So this is surprising to see. This is a tough rep. But yeah, I don't want to see any of this, because this is what you open yourself up to if you're having him catch the ball in the middle of the field in stride with space. He's that kind of athlete where he can make things happen after the catch, and we saw it there. So Miami won this game, but he did everything in his power because, like I said, they force feed him the ball. There's, make no mistake about it. Almost like the Lions are going to run the ball. Dallas is going to get 88 the ball.
Yeah, and with
That's
Dak
guaranteed.
playing at the level he's playing at this year, this offensive line doing a good enough job, to your point, the only reason this game was even as close as it was is because Dallas's offensive line wasn't quite up to snuff. But this offense has a lot of pieces. But again, like you said, they lean heavily on CeeDee to take a lot of the load when it comes down to the passing attack.
Yeah, and it's definitely, they have had issues protecting Prescott as of late, and it shows up. It definitely showed up a lot in the Miami game. Yeah, and then this third clip a little later in the game, again, Dallas utilizes quite a bit of motion, and some of it's just to, make it easy for Dak to identify man or zone, and then sometimes it's to leverage more favorable matchups. So here, this little motion by 18 ends up, you get a late switch where you have 40, a linebacker matched up on Lamb, and this is barbecue chicken from the jump, man. Immediately, Prescott knows where he's going with the ball. There's no mistake about it, and yeah, this is an easy throw and catch, right? Like another instance of making it too easy for a really good player.
Yeah, and I think this is where things start to get really interesting for the Lions. We've seen them become a lot more aggressive these last couple of weeks with blitzes and things of that nature. And typically when you're blitzing, that typically means man coverage. If you're lined up in man, there's that opportunity that matchups like this start to get created just because of motion. And how comfortable do you feel with an Alex Anzalone or a Jack Campbell having to cover CeeDee Lamb in a situation like this?
Not comfortable, and both those guys are really good athletes at the linebacker position, particularly Jack Campbell. Like, people don't realize that man's RAS score, shout out Kentley Platty again, was incredible. Like, I think it was like 8th out of a ton of linebackers since they've been doing the data. But yeah, I think here this just needs to be another instance of Aaron Glenn getting creative with his personnel and having, like we talked about the last video, Brian Branch, Melifonwu, and Kirby on the field at the same time, just to have more athleticism on the field, because Dallas hasn't ran the ball well. It kind of ties into their offensive line play as a whole. It's just not really going well for them right now in that area. which is why they've lost a couple games here as of late to the Dolphins and then the Bills. They kind of got bullied, especially against the Bills. They
Yeah.
got bullied. That was like kind of what the Ravens did to the Lions earlier in the season. Just kind of a physically dominant, we catch you slipping and we're going to beat the crap out of you. That's what it was to me. And I watched that game front to back. So yeah, but to the Lions' credit, that's where they're strong, right? Is the offensive
Yeah.
line, the defensive lines played better as of late. And I think Dan Campbell alluded to it in his presser. They want to make Dallas as one-dimensional as possible. So yes, it's going to be tough to completely bottle up CeeDee Lamb. But if you take the run away from them and you kind of can pin your ears back and get some pressure on Prescott, then maybe you have a chance of limiting the damage Lamb can do, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say if you're able to limit this run game, which again the Lions defense has been able to do fairly consistently throughout most of the season, if you can kind of keep Tony Pollard and the rest of that rushing attack in check, and again get yourself into more third and favorable situations, third and longs, third and 8, third and 9 or longer, then again it gives you that opportunity, like you're saying, to allow your pass rushers to pin their ears back. You can get creative with your blitz packages. The only thing that is going to be a little bit different in this game versus what they were able to do against the likes of the Vikings and even Denver to an extent is that Dak's a little more mobile. So as much as we're talking about CD and the threat that he poses, Dak is fully healthy this year, and him being a little more mobile, not necessarily Lamar Jackson, but again, being able to pick up 8-9 yards when it's given to him is going to be another thing that this defense is going to have to be mindful of.
Yeah, and it's going to come down to personnel and scheme too, because you don't want to have too much where you're playing man on obvious passing situations, and then he does scramble, and all of your DBs and your linebackers have the back to the quarterback. So I do anticipate like Hutchinson. We need a big game from Hutchinson, man. I would like them to just line him up over Steele, the Cowboys' right tackle.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Unfortunately, he is the weak link. They have a really good, they have a good squad outside of him right now, and that's the tough part of offensive line plays. You can't hide them. Yeah, you can put a tight end in there, but then that's making it easier on the Lions, and they don't have to guard as many people. I know that sounds simple, but that's sometimes what it is. But yeah, it'd be really nice to see a multi-sack game from Hutch, just abusing Steele on that edge, because that would make things really easy if Aaron Glenn doesn't have to send extra rushers to get quick pressure on Prescott, and he can devote more bodies to shutting down the back end and trying to limit Lamb.
And it's worth mentioning, last year between Steele and Hutchinson, Aiden got the better of him twice in that game. And he, much like we saw what Micah Parsons was doing to Kendall Lamb, Aiden was having his way with Steele last year. Again, picking up 2 sacks and really just kind of bullying him a lot of that game. So I don't know, Morgan. It sounds like you're kind of in the same boat I am, where it's like, you know what, as you kind of start to look at the tape and you kind of look at where the Lions are now, there's a little more confidence going into this game. But no, let me know if I'm right on with that.
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back and forth, just because it's going to be a tough environment. They have a lot to play for. I think I have to stew on it like one more night maybe before I make my prediction. But they're gonna have a fighting chance, and if they can, I know it sounds simple and we've said it before, but if they can win the turnover battle and run the football, I think they have a really good chance of solidifying their odds at the 2 seed, which is so exciting. I can't believe we're here. Sometimes I got to pinch myself, right?
Yeah, what I was gonna say, the other thing that again, maybe it's false hope, I don't know, but the other thing that gives me some confidence is like this team has been talking the right way all this week. Dan Campbell, the coaches, the players, everyone has the same mindset in that, you know what? Yes, we did lock up the division. Yes, we do have a playoff spot, in the bag, but no one's satisfied. And I think, Dallas hasn't lost a game at home this season. I think the Lions would love to go in there and play spoiler and again give them that one loss in the season, and in the same token be able to lock up the division. Um, Again, watching that game from last year, it wasn't pretty, right? But you start to consider a lot of the things that went into that game. Amon-Ra getting hurt, on the second or third series of the offense. DeAndre Swift didn't play in that game. There was a lot of things that kind of just went wrong for the Lions, and then some of them were self-inflicted as well with turnovers. So if the Lions can play a cleaner game, if they can keep some of those bodies healthy on the field, this game can probably go the other way this time around.
100%, Meko. And to your point too, like, yeah, that game, the score was uglier than the game actually was, because it wasn't until later that game got away from the Lions, when the turnovers started, the floodgates opened, and it was just turnover, almost in, quote unquote garbage time. So yeah, that's a different Lions team, and I expect them to come out ready, because like you said, Campbell has said all the right things this week. It seems like he's got them motivated, even though they just locked up the division, and it would be easy to rest on that, just to be comfortable with that. But from the jump, they said that was their first goal, and they have higher aspirations this year for this team. So I'm excited to hear that, because I hate the Cowboys, man. I'm going to keep it a buck with you. I know the fans in the comments, I don't care. I hate y'all. I don't care.
I was gonna say, I'm right there with you. Like, I don't think there's a fan. No, well, there's one other fan base in the NFL that I hate just as much as I hate the Cowboys. But I do. I hate you guys.
Yep.
I'm sure you're all great people, right?
Maybe.
You're terrible fans. I hate you as fans. I hate your team.
Yeah.
I hate your owner.
Yep. Owner especially.
I love but I love your pass rusher, and I love your wide receiver. Like,
yep.
CeeDee and Micah are awesome. There's some other stuff going on over there though that
not so awesome.
But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Let us know in the comment section below, where do you guys kind of, land on this game? Are you confident in the Lions' ability to probably go into Dallas and pull out a win? Is there a player that we didn't get to talk about? Because again, we did keep it focused to just 2 players that you're really worried about and that you think the Lions need to have, circled and have a really strong game plan for. Let us know. And if you're a Cowboys fan watching this, what do you think? I mean, I know what you think, but humor me and let me know what you think is going to happen in this game come this Saturday night. But with all that said, I'm Meko, he's Morgan. Also, be sure to check out PrideDetroit.com if you're looking for any more articles or any more predictions or any other insight into this potential matchup or into this matchup that's going to take place this weekend. And also be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. That way you can be notified anytime we upload new videos to the channel here. But with all that said, I kind of botched our outro, but that's going to do it for us. We'll see you guys in the next video.